A confession to make, but I better get it out of the way. I'm a fully paid up member of the Church of England. I can't help it, you know. I was brought up that way. I never had a chance. Now, the reason I tell you this is because in Sudan, there's a thing called the Episcopal Church of the Sudan, and that is, if you like, the Church of England in Sudan. You don't need to worry too much about it. It becomes relevant later on. Okay, then. So let's begin with a little biblical bit, just for your information, and in case your geography isn't as good as mine. Sudan is to the south of Egypt, and there are various places in the Bible where there are references to Cush or Cushites. Now, as far as I can make out, sometimes we're talking about somewhere, I suppose, in the general region of Saudi Arabia, but at other times it seems that they're talking about the Nuba area, and we are today interested especially in the Nuba area. Right, now, just a little bit of history. I'm sorry about this, but it's relevant. There's been a lot of civil war in Sudan, and it's been going on, off and on, for, 40 years and more. And there were quite a lot of churches in the area of Kadugli. Now, Kadugli is in the south of Sudan, but it's on the border with, but not part of, the nation of South Sudan. That's confusing. I'm sorry about it, but that's politics for you. I visited the town of Kadugli, and I saw a fair number of Christian churches. Again, we'll come back to that later. I'm tossing out all these little bits of information and then saying, well, we'll deal with that later. I know. Anyway, the civil war pre-2019 was rather nasty. Don't need to go into details. Actually, I don't know too much about it. But in 2019, there was an uprising in Khartoum. This was the ordinary people of Khartoum rising up against the then military dictatorship. And they carried sufficient weight to overthrow that dictatorship, or at least to overthrow the president. And then they settled down to have a constitutional conference so that they could work out just what kind of government they were going to have. Now, that was a nice quiet interlude, and that was when I and a party from this area went out to Sudan. And then we had wonderful things happening there, miracles, healings, and, you know, it strengthened the church there. But round about 2022, civil war broke out again. You see, there were two major military forces there. There was the army, which I'm going to refer to as the SAF, the Sudan Armed Forces. They're sort of official. And there's the militia, the Rapid Support Force, who had some sort of standing, official standing, but it was rather limited. Now, the thing is that the way the Constitutional Conference was going, they weren't at all sure that their position was going to be protected. I mean, you know, this democracy lark is all right, provided I keep what's mine, and possibly a bit more as well. So the war started, and it was rather more vicious than the war before. And it spread. Now, the most populous areas of Sudan are around the edges. The middle is the Sahara Desert, which isn't quite as bleak as you might expect, but nevertheless, it doesn't provide a good, prosperous living. And this war sort of spread round the edges. Now, Kadugli is at the southern edge, and on the western edge, you've got Darfur, which has received some media attention a couple of years ago, particularly because the RSF, the Rapid Support Force, decided that they wanted that area. They were going to conquer that area, and too bad for anyone caught in their way. And the army fought back, but eventually decided they'd better back out. Now, what followed has been described officially as genocide. That's just one aspect of the thing. It's something that we are concerned about in other areas too. But meanwhile, the army on the east side was gradually making progress, and it's making progress down towards Kadugli. Now, I have to say to you that the warfare has been nasty. Yeah, there's been killings, there's been violence, there's been robbery, there's been other things that you can ask me about later, but I don't want to mention them in public, but I've wept over them. So, there's the war, and naturally, most of the population is rather worried about this because it could come here soon and affect us. And let's face it, most people just want a quiet life. So what about the church? I think there's two things to say about the church. One is that they are affected and they are concerned, and naturally they want protection, and like everybody else, they want food. Food is very difficult out there at the moment because trade is very difficult. Yeah, they want protection. Of course they do. But would you believe the church is growing? Now, Pastor Tony mentioned a baptism, and I guess that is when people become full members of...
It's the step on the way to full membership, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. Now, the Anglican sort of step towards full membership is confirmation. And usually you can get a few people, a few candidates each year from each church to be confirmed. I'm afraid I've been rather tactless, and I've mentioned at certain diocesan meetings that in 1 month in the Diocese of Kadugli, there were 3 confirmations. The smallest of them was over 100 people. As I say, I'm a bit tactless. But the church is growing. And I see that very much in the kind of prayers that they're asking for. There's an undercurrent of we know that God is with us. And there are things, one of their clergy died recently, and his loss was felt. But they were not discouraged because they know what the hope is for not only for him, but for us as well. They're lovely. Now, I'm going to tell you something absolutely shocking. You see, as a member of the Church of England, we have a fairly stable, civilized form of service. Possibly you do too. Now, in the Episcopal Church of Sudan, every now and again, people sort of break out into dancing. You know? Yes, you can see it's not entirely dignified and sedate. And they have drums as well, and they play them. I don't think there's actual groups. It's just that someone's brought along a drum, so let's bang away on it. Splendid. And it's lovely, and it gives honour to God. Now, that is actually in the cathedral at Kadugli. If you've ever been down to Salisbury and looked at the cathedral there, it's nothing like that. Never mind. You know, they're lovely people, and they've been persecuted as well. Now, the town of Kadugli is on the edge of the Nuba Mountains, and when the warfare got a bit hot, Bishop Hassan, he moved out of the town into the edge of the mountains, and he continues to minister, and he gets around a bit, I can tell you. So that is very good. Anyhow, we had this conference there, and this is where all this took place. Well, not that actually, because that's out in the open, isn't it? We were very sedate and in the cathedral, and besides, I don't know that I could have coped with bright sunshine like that, but never mind, it was great. We worshipped in the cathedral. We had this conference in the cathedral, and I noticed that, yes, there were, I'm going to say, Anglican clergy that I could identify, but there were a few others that seemed not to be. And at the end of the week that we were out there, we all met together for a sort of farewell meal, and some of these clergy were there too. And they told us that under the earlier civil war, things had got a bit hot, and quite a lot of ministers had left the area. But those that remained had drawn closer together. Now, one of these was a Roman Catholic priest. Bless him. Now, we have our theological differences, and he acknowledged that. But he said that the important thing about what was going on is not our denominational differences, it's the fact that we are all one in Christ Jesus, and we are. And that was so healing for me, because I'd grown up with an atmosphere of the Roman Catholic Church being a bit standoffish and things like that, and to realize that actually, yes, they really are Christians. They may hold different views on certain things, and my views haven't changed at all, but the fact is they love Jesus, and so do we, and so do they. I'm going to bring in a topical moment. What does the church get up to out there? Well, with all these young people coming to Jesus, how do you keep them occupied, engaged? They have started football teams. Oh goodness, how worldly. But there you are, they have. And they're very good. And I have one contact out there, and he recently posted on Facebook his pleasure at the victory of the Argentinian team. I won't tell you over whom, but I will say that by the grace of God, I've forgiven him. But remember, these are people who are suffering. They're suffering economically. They're suffering with basic human rights. Oh, yeah, I didn't mention the refugee problem. Well, what do you do when the war moves near to you? Well, you could stick around and endure the violence, or you could move out. Population of Sudan is officially about 48 million. Now, I investigated this yesterday. I saw two reports, very recent reports. One said that 9.5 million of them were displaced. The other said 14 million. In a population of 48 million, that's quite big. And where do they go? Well, some of them go abroad. They've gone to Egypt up in the north. They've gone over into Chad in the west. They've gone into South Sudan. And sometimes they don't get that far. To go to South Sudan, they pass through the Diocese of Kadugli. And some of them stop there, which creates an additional problem because, where are you going to put them, accommodate them? And of course, they want food and things like that. Of course they do. So it's just an additional problem. There is a lot to pray about. Now, two other things about the Nuba Mountains. One is that apparently the warfare, the civil war, has caused a reduction in intertribal conflict. It's an unlooked for benefit. But recently, one tribe attacked another, and amongst the mediators called in were two bishops. That's interesting. And the other thing is about education. Now, I was showing Dave on the map. There is a map through there, by the way, the whole area, and you cannot identify a lot of the places. But I know that there's education going on in the Nuba Mountains. I know it for the worst possible reason. A couple of months ago, a drone launched, I think by the RSF, bombed a school there. Surprise, surprise, children were killed and probably teachers as well. And surprise, surprise, mothers came looking to see where their children were. Are they safe? You can understand the panic there. And then another drone arrived and landed amongst them. This is vicious, but the church is still trying to promote education there, as not only on a sort of ordinary secular level of reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also theologically. They're training ministers. It's all positive stuff. So there is a very scanty overview of the Diocese of Kadugli and the Sudan as a whole. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.